too bad things didn't go the way you thought. My husband laughed. You thought I'd just sign the divorce papers and disappear. He smirked. He changed the moment my father-in-law was hospitalized. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Ben and I are going to split the inheritance. You're not getting anything. There's no money for a wife who can't even take care of the house, my mother-in-law added. I didn't know what to say. When I went to the city hall to file for the divorce, I found out something shocking. My name is Emma. I'm 24 years old and a stay-at-home wife. Ben, my husband, is 40. It's one of those May-December romances, but it wasn't like a movie romance. It just kind of happened. I ended up working for Ben's father at a construction company, and for some reason, the company president really liked me from the start. He kept asking me to marry his son. It turned out that Ben didn't have any other serious relationships, and his father was worried about the company's future. The president, who worked hard to build the company, didn't want it to fail without an heir. Ben's father, who knew my dad through work, came to our house and asked for me to marry his son. My family also owns a construction company that's been around for generations. My dad worked for Ben's father when he was younger and got a lot of help from him. Maybe because of this, my dad didn't turn down the offer right away. He wanted us to date first, before making a decision. I want to respect both Ben's and Emma's choices, my dad said, but we'll wait to talk about marriage until after a dating period. Ben knew that marrying me was the only way to take over the company, so he agreed to my dad's plan. We got along well and went on lots of dates, dinners, movies, shopping, and more. After spending some time together, we felt that we'd be fine getting married. We got officially engaged not long after that, but soon after our engagement, Ben's father got sick and had to go to the hospital often. Since Ben was working, it was up to me and my mother-in-law to take care of him. I, his fiancée, had to take care of my father-in-law in the hospital. My mother-in-law kept telling me to focus more on housework, saying, "You're not doing a good job, especially if you're going to be my daughter-in-law. Hurry up, the morning visiting hours will end. Take him." Even before we're married, I felt like a maid, but I just replied, "Okay, I'm coming, I'll start the car." One day, while I was looking after my father-in-law, my mother-in-law suggested I move in with them. She said it would be easier for me to care for him. I agreed because commuting from my parents' house to the hospital was tiring. Since I would be moving in soon anyway, I figured we could get the marriage paperwork done while I was living there, especially since I thought the wedding would happen after my father-in-law's health improved. When I moved in, I didn't hear any rumors about Ben having other relationships, but soon, I understood why he was 40 and had never been in a serious relationship. Ben was very careful with money. He was a bit of a tightwad, keeping track of every penny he spent on me, on meals, and even on gas. My mother-in-law, who liked to boss me around, was always around, being sarcastic and rude. Ben never said anything when she spent a lot of money on expensive travel and designer goods. I began to wonder if Ben was just a mama's boy who put his mother above everything else. To be honest, I realized I probably married him too quickly. I should have gotten to know him and his family better first, but when I thought about my dad and my father-in-law, I felt stuck. My father-in-law's kindness was the only thing keeping me going. That morning, I was about to take my father-in-law to the hospital because he'd been feeling unwell. My mother-in-law treated me like a housekeeper. "Have you made breakfast yet, Emma? You didn't clean well yesterday. Hurry up," she ordered while sitting in front of the TV. Ben was next to her, just watching. "I'm sorry, I don't have time. I need to take your husband to the hospital," I said. "Well, maybe you should have gotten up earlier. I'm going out too, so make us breakfast before you leave," she snapped. I couldn't believe it. They weren't even helping their husband and father. "Please wait, father-in-law. I'll be done soon," I said, rushing to make breakfast and serving it to Ben and my mother-in-law. After I finished, I went to help my father-in-law stand up. "I'm sorry for making you work so much. I owe your dad an apology too," he said. Just then, he collapsed. "Are you okay?" I asked, panicked, but my mother-in-law and Ben just kept eating breakfast as if nothing had happened. I ended up calling an ambulance. I couldn't think straight until I heard the sirens. When the ambulance arrived, my mother-in-law said, "Sorry, Emma, I have to leave, so you take care of the rest." Ben followed right after her. "I have work to do, so please lock up," he said, trying to explain himself. They left me with my father-in-law. At the hospital, my father-in-law had regained consciousness and was admitted. After the hospital procedures and seeing the doctor, it was already dark. "If anything happens to me, I'll leave you something, Emma," my father-in-law said weakly, as I sat beside him. It's my way of apologizing for making you deal with my ungrateful son and wife. I'd been so focused on work that I didn't see what was going on at home, he continued, apologizing for wanting me to marry Ben. Just then, I heard someone clear their throat at the door. Ben and my mother-in-law had arrived. They came up to me and asked about my father-in-law's condition. Thinking they were worried, I assured them, he'll be fine, he just needs some rest, and we'll be out of here soon. I shared what the doctor had said, but I swear, I saw Ben click his tongue, and it seemed like my mother-in-law was disappointed. A few days later, as I was preparing to visit my father-in-law again, Ben and my mother-in-law handed me a piece of paper. You filled this out. Please submit it to the government office, my mother-in-law said. The form was a divorce paper. Ben had overheard the conversation in my father-in-law's hospital room and said, my dad got weak and said he was going to give you part of his inheritance, but we aren't giving you anything. Isn't that what you wanted all along? Marrying someone so much older? Your plan failed. Go file for divorce, and you'll be out of our lives. He cursed at me. What? I gasped, shocked by his words. I didn't expect him to say all of that. Just go to the government office. Ben and I will divide his inheritance. You're not getting anything, since you can't even take care of the house, my mother-in-law added. What I was hearing disgusted me. My father-in-law was supposed to be discharged from the hospital soon, but they sounded as if they expected him to die. I was terrified. How can you be so cruel? He's your family, he's not going to die, he'll get better. And don't accuse me of wanting the inheritance. That was never my goal, I snapped angrily. I filled out the divorce papers and rushed to the government office, hoping to end it all quickly. When I handed in the papers, the receptionist gave me a strange look. Is there something wrong with the form? I asked. He said my name wasn't correct. When I checked, I saw that it was fine, but then he asked for my maiden name, which matched. The official laughed and said, your marriage certificate was never submitted. You were never married. He handed back my divorce papers. I called my mother-in-law to ask about it, and she casually said, oh, I completely forgot I had it. I didn't believe her. She had mistreated me all this time. What? You did this on purpose and treated me like a maid? I shouted, unable to stay calm. Well, it would be hard to ask you to do housework if you weren't my daughter-in-law, but as a wife, I can ask you for anything, she said, laughing without any regret. I heard Ben laughing too, and I felt my anger rise. I was determined to fight back. I called my dad and asked him to come with me to the government office. He hurried over, and we went back to the same official. We even got a certificate of residence to confirm the facts. We discovered that Ben's name and address hadn't changed. I had been tricked into thinking our marriage had been registered. I had worked hard, believing I was his wife, only to be told to leave when it came to the inheritance. Even my normally calm father was furious. Together, we went to the hospital to talk to my father-in-law. When he saw my dad, he said, you didn't have to come all the way here. But after hearing everything from my dad, his face turned red with anger. We sat in his hospital room and discussed what we would do about Ben and my mother-in-law. Neither of them had visited my father-in-law since he was hospitalized. Then, my father-in-law made a surprising suggestion. He couldn't expect Ben to properly take over the family business. Instead, he wanted to pass it on to my dad. Luckily, my father-in-law's business was doing well, and it could easily merge with my dad's company. My father-in-law believed that as long as the company survived, it didn't matter who ran it. He knew that if Ben took over, the company would likely fail due to his personality. This was the best decision for the future and to protect the company. Ben's father laughed when he heard about this. She's so obsessed with money that she spends it all while ignoring her husband. She deserves this, he said, shaking his head. Then he turned to me and my dad and asked, is this enough to make up for the trouble I've caused you? My dad and I exchanged glances and smiled, knowing this was the perfect punishment. The next day, my dad's lawyers and accountants got to work. They decided to merge Ben's father's business with my dad's, keeping the company name. Ben, the vice president, was fired and replaced by someone from my dad's company. The official decisions would be made once my father-in-law was back at work. This would surprise Ben and his mother. It was the start of their downfall. 2 weeks later, my father-in-law was discharged from the hospital. My dad and I picked him up and took him home. When we arrived, my mother-in-law was gone, and Ben was at work as usual. They had no idea that the next day, everything would change. The next morning, I went back to my old job. A new vice president was in place. Ben's father held a morning meeting in the large conference room and told everyone that the company would merge with my father's. Ben came in, holding a termination letter, and my mother-in-law had a divorce decree. "Hey, Dad, what is this?" Ben asked, his voice full of disbelief. "What's going on?" "I didn't hear about this," he added. "I didn't hear about anything either," his mother said, equally shocked. "How could this happen so suddenly?" she complained. The entire room was stunned to see Ben and his mother so upset in front of so many employees. "This is exactly what I was hoping for. It's your fault," they both yelled when they saw me. "You did this, didn't you? You just wanted the inheritance." "I didn't do anything," I replied calmly. "You started all of this." Ben's father then stepped in with a cold stare. "Enough, you're disturbing my meeting. Get out," he shouted. Employees quickly escorted Ben and his mother out. He then turned to the rest of the room and apologized, finishing the meeting. Later, Ben and my mother-in-law, now calmer, repeatedly apologized to me and my father, but I had no intention of forgiving them, so I ignored them. They hung around the company for a while, but eventually, they stopped showing up. The security guards were told not to let them in anymore. They were even kicked out of their home and now live in a dirty apartment near their old house. As for me, I'm living peacefully as an office worker. My dad is still angry and is preparing to file a claim for compensation from Ben and my mother-in-law. They've lost all hope of earning a living. This is just the beginning of their downfall. I won't help them. Of course, I hope they've learned that how you treat others always comes back to you.